A cold night, a broken taxi, and an unexpected gesture changed everything. Ryan didn't know it, but the encounter with a stranger would mark his destiny forever. Years later, the mystery still haunted him. Who was that woman? And what truth was she hiding? The answer was closer than he imagined. The night was especially cold in Boston. Ryan adjusted the thin collar of his worn shirt, trying uselessly to protect himself from the cutting breeze that swept through the downtown streets. His taxi, an '89 Chevy that knew every alley and avenue of the city like the back of its hand, was parked on the shoulder of Commonwealth Avenue, surrounded by smoke escaping from the hood. No, not today, he muttered to himself, while trying for the third time to start the car. The engine only responded with a sickly noise before falling completely silent. Ryan let his head fall onto the steering wheel, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. That car was everything he had, his only source of income, and now it was there, abandoning him when he needed it most. He checked his wallet, even though he knew exactly what he would find. Just a few loose bills, insufficient even for a coffee. The rent was late, the refrigerator at home practically empty, and now this. He got out of the car, opening the hood more out of habit than hope. The smoke made him cough, and he took a step back, leaning against the side of the vehicle. That's when he noticed the small diner across the street, its fluorescent lights creating a small oasis of warmth in the cold night. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since breakfast. With a resigned sigh, he locked the car and crossed the street, more to shelter from the cold than for any other reason. The bell on the door jingled when he entered, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped him like a hug. A few people occupied the tables, absorbed in their own stories. Ryan chose a stool at the counter as far away as possible from the other customers. He didn't want conversation, didn't want looks of pity. He just wanted a moment to think, to try to find a way out of the labyrinth his life had become. "What'll it be, sir?" asked the waitress, a middle-aged woman with a tired but genuine smile. "Just a coffee, please," he replied, mentally calculating if the coins in his pocket would be enough. That's when she walked in. Ryan couldn't say afterward what caught his attention first. If it was the soft tinkle of her steps, the delicate jasmine perfume that filled the air, or simply the aura of serenity that seemed to emanate from her. She was a simple woman, dressed in a navy blue midi skirt and a white blouse, brown hair tied in an unpretentious bun. But there was something in her eyes, a sparkle of wisdom and kindness that seemed to illuminate the whole place. She sat down, 2 stools away from Ryan, ordering a chamomile tea. Her eyes met his for a brief moment and she smiled, a smile so genuine and welcoming that it made something inside him warm up, as if for an instant all his problems had diminished. The waitress returned with Ryan's coffee, and he began to search his pockets, feeling his face burn with shame as he realized he was a few coins short. Before he could say anything, the woman with the gentle smile had already leaned in his direction. "Please allow me," she said, her voice as soft as velvet. "Sometimes all someone needs is a small act of kindness." Ryan tried to refuse, but there was something in the way she spoke, a quiet certainty that didn't allow for discussion. She not only paid for his coffee, but also ordered a plate of food for him, ignoring his polite protests with a wave of her hand. "You look like you've had a difficult day," she commented while he ate. There was no judgment in her voice, only understanding. Ryan found himself telling her about the broken taxi, about the bills piling up, about how he had reached that point after losing his job at the company where he had worked for years. She listened attentively without interrupting, her brown eyes fixed on him with an intensity that seemed to see beyond the words. When he finished, she opened her purse and took out an envelope. "Take this," she said, sliding it across the surface of the counter. "Use it to fix your taxi. It's a loan if that makes you feel better. When you can, pay it forward. Help someone who needs it, just as you needed help today." Ryan looked at the envelope, feeling his eyes sting. "I don't even know your name," he managed to say. She smiled again, that smile that seemed to carry all the kindness in the world. "Sometimes names aren't important. What matters are the moments we share, the small choices we make to make someone's life a little better. Before he could insist, she had already stood up, leaving behind only the jasmine perfume and a feeling that something extraordinary had happened. Ryan sat there holding the envelope, watching through the window as she disappeared into the night, her elegant figure blending into the crowd like an angel who had fulfilled her mission. Inside the envelope, besides the money, there was a small note written in delicate handwriting. Sometimes all someone needs is a push to keep going. Don't give up on your dreams. That night, as he walked back to his taxi with a lighter heart and a satisfied stomach, Ryan didn't know that this encounter would change his life forever. He didn't know that years later he would be looking for her in every face in the crowd, in every kind smile that crossed his path. He didn't know that this nameless woman would become his guiding light, his inspiration to transform not only his own life, but the lives of others who, like him, just needed a chance, an act of kindness to start over. The first rays of sun were already painting Boston's horizon when Ryan finished his first fare of the day. The taxi, now functioning perfectly after the repair, slid smoothly through the streets of the city that was beginning to awaken. Only a week had passed since that encounter at the diner, but each moment remained vivid in his memory as if it had happened just minutes ago. The envelope he had received contained exactly the amount needed for the car repair and a little extra that helped him catch up on his bills. But it wasn't just the money that changed his life. It was the confidence placed in him by a complete stranger, the certainty he saw in her eyes that he was capable of much more. During that week, Ryan began to observe the city and his passengers with different eyes. He now noticed how many people, just like him, carried their own invisible burdens. An elderly lady who entered his taxi that morning told him about how difficult it was for her to get to the hospital for her appointments. Without thinking twice, Ryan offered a discount on her future rides. "You are very kind, sir," she said, surprised. "These days it's rare to find people like you." Ryan smiled, remembering the note he carried in his wallet. "Sometimes all someone needs is a little push," he replied, feeling a wave of satisfaction at seeing the grateful smile of the lady. The weeks turned into months, and Ryan began to build a reputation among his passengers. He was known as the taxi driver, who always had a kind word, who sometimes gave discounts to those in need, who waited patiently when a mother had to organize her shopping and her child in the back seat. It was during one of these rides that he had an idea that would change his destiny. He was taking an executive to the airport when the man began to complain about the difficulty of finding reliable transportation for his international clients. "Do you know how much business we lose when an important client misses a meeting because the taxi didn't arrive on time?" commented the executive, clearly frustrated. Ryan listened attentively, an idea beginning to form in his mind. That night, after ending his shift, he sat at the kitchen table of his small apartment and began to make calculations. What if he could create a specialized executive transportation service, something that offered not just transportation, but an entire personalized service experience? Using the small computer he had bought with his savings, he began to research business plans, business management, and marketing. He started visiting the public library during his free hours, devouring books on entrepreneurship. With each new piece of knowledge acquired, he felt he was one step closer to accomplishing something significant. On a particularly busy afternoon, he transported a business consultant who, impressed with his professionalism, began to request his services frequently. Madison, as she introduced herself, became not just a regular client, but an informal mentor who helped him refine his ideas. "You have something special, Ryan," she said during a ride. "It's not just about transporting people from one place to another. You understand people, service, creating connections." With Madison's guidance, Ryan began to structure his business plan. In the spare hours between one ride and another, he visited companies, presented his proposal for a personalized executive transportation service. He faced many closed doors, but with each no he received, he remembered the gentle smile of that mysterious woman and how she had believed in him when even he didn't believe in himself. His first big contract came 6 months later with a multinational company that needed reliable transportation for its executives. Ryan invested his savings in buying a newer car, hired another driver carefully selected, and trained to his service standards, and so Executive Connection was born. The difference in his service wasn't just in the impeccable cars or the British punctuality, it was in the attention to detail. Each client had their preferences recorded, ideal air conditioning temperature preferred, radio station, brand of mineral water, small gestures that made all the difference. As his company grew, Ryan never forgot his origins. He maintained a policy of special prices for the elderly and people with special needs, and encouraged his employees to have the same sensitivity with clients that he had learned on that cold night. In his moments of reflection, he frequently found himself thinking about her. Where would she be? Would she know how her small act of kindness had triggered an entire transformation? Sometimes, when he passed by Commonwealth Avenue, he would slow down when passing the old diner, hoping perhaps to see her again sitting at the counter, ordering her chamomile tea. But life followed its course, and with the growing success of his company, Ryan found himself increasingly busy. From a single taxi, his fleet had grown to 10 executive cars in just 2 years. His services were requested by companies from all over the country, and he began to think about expanding to other cities. However, amid all the achievements, there was an emptiness that success didn't fill. Every time he smelled jasmine perfume, his heart would skip a beat, and his eyes would instinctively search for that face that had changed his life. The note, worn by time but still legible, remained in his wallet, a constant reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected encounters. What Ryan didn't know was that destiny still had plans for him, and that night at the diner was just the first chapter of a much bigger story that was yet to come. 5 years had passed since that night that changed everything. Executive Connection now occupied 3 floors of an elegant commercial building in the heart of Boston. Ryan observed the city through the large windows of his office, the lights of the buildings beginning to turn on as the afternoon fell. His company had become a reference in luxury executive transportation, with branches in 3 major cities and a fleet of more than 50 vehicles. However, even surrounded by success, there were moments when he felt inexplicably restless. On that particular afternoon, after an important meeting with international investors, his thoughts turned once again to that mysterious woman with the gentle smile. "Mr. Ryan?" His assistant's voice brought him back to the present. "Ms. Madison is here for the 4 p.m. meeting." Madison entered the room with her usual energy. Now, besides being a client, she was an official consultant for the company and one of the people Ryan trusted most. "You seem distant today," she observed, sitting in the armchair in front of his desk. Ryan smiled, taking his wallet and removing the already worn note that he always carried with him. "I was thinking about how it all started," he confessed, passing the paper to Madison. She examined the note with curiosity. "You never told me this story completely. You just mentioned that someone helped you when you needed it." Ryan took a deep breath and for the first time in years shared all the details of that night. Madison listened attentively, her eyes shining, with growing interest. "And you never tried to find her?" she asked, returning the note. "How? I don't know her name, age, nothing. Just the memory of her face and that jasmine perfume." Madison leaned forward, a mysterious smile on her lips. "You know, Ryan, in the last few years you've built an impressive network of contacts. Why not use those resources to look for her?" This idea hit Ryan like lightning. Why hadn't he thought of this before? He had technology, resources, connections, everything he needed to start a proper search. In the following weeks, between his responsibilities at the company, Ryan began a discreet investigation. He hired a team to research old security camera, footage from the area, interview employees of establishments near the diner, any clue that could lead him to her. It was during this search that he discovered something intriguing. The diner where everything happened had closed 2 years ago, but the former owner, Mr. George, still maintained a small cafe in the Beacon Hill neighborhood. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, Ryan decided to visit him. The cafe was a cozy place, with small wooden tables and the unmistakable aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Mr. George, A gentleman with grey hair and an easy smile recognized him immediately. "The guy with the broken taxi," he exclaimed, pulling up a chair. "How could I forget? You and that lady, now she always came at the same time, you know, always ordered chamomile tea and sometimes spent hours talking with customers." Ryan's heart accelerated. "Do you know who she was?" Mr. George scratched his chin, thoughtful. "Name I never knew for sure, but she worked with books that I remember well. Always carried some with her, talked about poetry. There was once when she mentioned an old bookstore downtown, near Copley Square. It was a tenuous clue, but it was more than Ryan had had in years. In the following days, between meetings and commitments, he began to visit all the old bookstores in the region. In each one, he showed the only photo he had of the diner, an old and blurry image where her profile could be partially seen at the counter. During one of these visits, in a small bookstore specializing in used books, an elderly employee widened her eyes upon seeing the photo. "Oh, that's Hannah," she exclaimed. "She used to work here a few years ago. She had a special way with customers, always knew exactly which book to recommend, but she moved, only left a postcard from a small coastal town." Hannah. Finally, a name for the face that had inhabited his thoughts for so long. Ryan felt as if an important piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. "Do you remember the name of the town?" he asked. The employee frowned, trying to remember. "It was a small town. Nantucket, maybe? No, not. It was more to the south." "Ah, yes, Martha's Vineyard. She mentioned something about opening her own bookstore there." Ryan thanked her, feeling a mixture of emotions that he couldn't define. Martha's Vineyard. Destiny seemed to be giving him a second chance, an opportunity to find the woman who had changed his life with a simple act of kindness. That night, alone in his apartment, Ryan observed the city lights while planning his next step. The company was stable, his team was competent and reliable. Perhaps it was time to take a trip, to follow this echo of the past that had never really silenced in his heart. What he didn't know was that his search for Hannah was about to reveal much more than just the whereabouts of a kind stranger. Destiny had woven a much more complex plot than he could imagine, and each step toward her brought him closer to a truth that would change his life once again. The ferry smoothly cut through the waters of Vineyard Sound, slowly approaching Martha's Vineyard. Ryan was leaning on the railing, watching the island grow on the horizon. The sea breeze tousled his hair, bringing with it a scent of the ocean that seemed to cleanse not only his lungs, but also his soul. Madison had insisted on organizing everything at the company, so he could take a few days off. "You built a competent team exactly for moments like this," she said. "Let us take care of everything. Go find your destiny." The morning was particularly beautiful, with the sun painting golden reflections on the water and the clouds forming whimsical designs in the blue sky. Ryan smiled, thinking about how his life had changed. 5 years ago he was broke and hopeless. Now he was a successful businessman, in search of the woman who had planted the seed of his transformation. When the ferry finally docked, Ryan picked up his car from the boat's garage and followed the road that wound around the island. He had reserved a room in a charming inn in the historic center, close to the region where, according to his research, the main bookstores in the town were concentrated. The inn was a restored colonial mansion, with large windows and a porch that offered a breathtaking view of the sea. The owner, Mrs. Clare, an elegant lady with silver hair and lively eyes, welcomed him with the characteristic hospitality of small-town residents. "Are you here on business?" she asked, as she led him to his room. "Actually, I'm looking for someone," Ryan replied. "A woman named Hannah who might have opened a bookstore around here." Mrs. Clare paused for a moment, a gleam of recognition in her eyes. "Hannah, the lady from Lighthouse Bookstore?" Ryan's heart leaped. "Do you know her?" "Oh, yes. She has a charming bookstore in the village. Everyone knows Hannah around here, always organizing literary gatherings, helping at the community library. But..." Mrs. Clare hesitated for a moment. "She's traveling now. She went to visit her sister in Newport, if I'm not mistaken. She should be back in a few days." Ryan felt a mixture of disappointment and hope. He was so close, and yet he would still need to wait. After settling into his room, he decided to visit the bookstore anyway. Following Mrs. Clare's directions, he walked along the cobblestone streets of the historic centre until he found a charming building with a sign that said, Lighthouse Bookstore. The facade was painted in a soft shade of blue, with large windows that let in natural light. Through the glass he could see ancient wooden shelves full of books, comfortable armchairs scattered around the corners, and at the counter, an arrangement of jasmine flowers in a ceramic vase. A young attendant welcomed him with a smile. "Can I help you?" "Yes, I'm looking for Hannah." "Oh, she's traveling," replied the young woman, "but she'll be back next week. Would you like to leave a message?" Ryan hesitated. What could he say? "I'm the taxi driver she helped 5 years ago and never managed to forget." He opted to just thank her and began to explore the bookstore. Every detail of the place seemed to carry the essence of that woman who had changed his life. The careful organization of the books, the poetic quotes written on small frames on the walls, the aroma of fresh coffee mixed with the scent of jasmine. On one of the shelves he found a section dedicated to poetry. Leafing through one of the books, a loose sheet fell to the floor. It was a handmade bookmark with a quote written by hand in a calligraphy that he would recognize anywhere. Sometimes the most important encounters happen in the pauses of life. The attendant, who introduced herself as Julia, noticed his interest. "Hannah makes those bookmarks. She has a social project here on the island, teaching crafts to children from the community. The money from the sales all goes to the project." Ryan bought the bookmark and some books, feeling increasingly fascinated by this woman who continued to surprise him even from a distance. In the following days, while waiting for her return, he began to get to know the island and its inhabitants better. He discovered that Hannah was a beloved figure in the community, always involved in social and cultural projects. At breakfast, Mrs. Clare would tell him stories about how Hannah had transformed the old abandoned bookstore into a cultural meeting point on the island. "She has a special gift," the lady would say. "She doesn't just sell books, you know. She sells dreams, possibilities. How many young people from here have discovered a love for reading thanks to her?" In his walks around the island, Ryan began to notice small details that seemed to tell Hannah's story. The community garden she had helped create, the traveling library that took books to more distant communities, the art workshops for underprivileged children. One afternoon, sitting on a bench in the square in front of the bookstore, Ryan realized that he was falling in love not only with the memory of that woman with the gentle smile, but with everything she represented, with everything she silently built on that island. What he didn't know was that destiny was preparing a much more surprising encounter than he could imagine. As he watched the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange, he had no idea that Hannah held a secret that connected their lives in a way that neither of them could have predicted. On the morning of the 6th day on Martha's vineyard, Ryan was awakened by an unusual commotion at the inn. Animated voices came from the garden, and the aroma of fresh coffee seemed more intense than normal. When he went down for breakfast, he found Mrs. Clare especially cheerful. "Hannah is back," she announced, serving him a cup of coffee. "She arrived last night. The bookstore should open later today." Ryan felt his heart accelerate. After 5 years, he was finally just a few hours away from meeting again the woman who had changed his life. He tried to concentrate on breakfast, but his mind wouldn't stop rehearsing what he would say when he saw her. It was at this moment that Julia, the bookstore attendant, hurriedly entered the inn. "Mrs. Clare, Hannah asked me to let you know that she'll be late today. She's resolving an emergency at the social project." "What happened?" asked Mrs. Clare, concerned. "The roof of the community centre has problems because of yesterday's rain. She's there trying to organize repairs before the workshop materials get damaged." Without thinking twice, Ryan stood up. "Where is this community centre?" Julia guided him to an old mansion on the outskirts of the village. Upon arriving, he found a group of people trying to protect books and artistic materials from the water dripping from the ceiling. And there she was, Hannah, coordinating everything with the same serenity that he remembered. 5 years had not changed her smile, or the way her eyes shone when she spoke to people. She wore a flowery skirt and a white blouse, her hair now shorter, but still tied in an unpretentious bun. The jasmine perfume still accompanied her. For a moment Ryan was paralyzed, observing her from afar. It was Julia who broke the ice. "Hannah, I brought help." Hannah turned, and for an instant, time seemed to freeze. Their eyes met, and Ryan saw the exact moment when recognition crossed her face. She brought her hand to her lips, surprised. "You," she whispered. "I came to thank you," said Ryan, his voice hoarser than he intended, "and to tell you that I followed your advice. I didn't give up on my dreams." Hannah took a step in his direction, but was interrupted by a crash from the roof. Reality was calling them back. "Can we talk later?" she asked, a mixture of emotions in her voice. "Now I need Let me take care of this," interrupted Ryan. "I know excellent professionals in Boston. I can make some calls." In the hours that followed, Ryan mobilized his contacts. Before nightfall, a specialized team had already arrived on the island and begun repairs on the roof. The project material was safe, and the children could return to their activities the next day. "You didn't need to do this," said Hannah, when they finally had a moment alone, sitting on a bench in the garden of the community center. "Yes, I did," Ryan replied. "You taught me that sometimes all someone needs is a small push. I'm just following your example." Hannah smiled, but there was something in her eyes, a shadow of concern. That intrigued Ryan. "Why did you never return to the diner?" he asked softly. She looked away to the sea that could be seen in the distance. "Because sometimes helping also means knowing when to step away," she answered enigmatically. "Some stories need to follow their own paths." "But you changed my life." "That night," insisted Ryan. "I spent years trying to find you, wanting to thank you, wanting to understand." Hannah gently interrupted him. "Ryan, there's something you need to know." She hesitated, as if carefully choosing her words. "That night, it wasn't just coincidence." Ryan frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "I knew your father," she revealed, her voice soft but firm. "Charles Edward was an extraordinary man. We worked together at the old publishing house before he departed," completed Ryan, feeling a lump in his throat. His father had been a respected editor, but a heart problem had taken him too early. "He always spoke of you with such pride," continued Hannah. "When I learned of your difficulties after the company closed, I wanted to help, but I knew you were too proud to accept direct help." Ryan felt the world spin. Memories of his father, stories he told about a special colleague from the publishing house, a woman who had helped him in difficult times. How had he not made the connection before? "So that night was my way of honoring your father's memory," completed Hannah. "He always said that you had immense potential, that you just needed the right opportunity to shine." Silent tears ran down Ryan's face. Years of questions finally found answers, but each answer brought with it new questions, new feelings, new possibilities. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange. A gentle breeze brought the scent of jasmine, now mixed with memories of a past that reconnected to the present in unexpected ways. What neither of them knew was that this revelation was just the beginning. Destiny still had more surprises in store, and the bond that united them was much deeper than either of them could imagine. Dawn on Martha's Vineyard brought a new perspective for Ryan. After the revelations of the previous day, he spent the night awake, turning over old memories, connecting dots that previously seemed scattered. He remembered the times when his father mentioned a special colleague from the publishing house, someone who shared his passion for transforming lives through books. That morning, he decided to have his coffee on the beach. Sitting on the sand, watching the waves break gently on the shore, he tried to organize his thoughts. The sea breeze brought with it a clarity that he so needed at that moment. "I thought I'd find you here," Hannah's voice surprised him. She carried 2 cups of coffee and sat down beside him on the sand. "You always knew where to find me, didn't you?" he asked, accepting the cup she offered him. Hannah smiled, that gentle smile that had been engraved in his memory for so long. Your father used to say that you always sought the sea when you needed to think. He was right. Why did you never look for me after that night? The question that had tormented him for years finally escaped. Hannah took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Because the journey needed to be yours, Ryan. If I had remained nearby, perhaps you would never have discovered your own strength. But you followed me from afar, didn't you? Yes, she admitted. Through Madison. Ryan widened his eyes. Madison, my consultant. She's my cousin, revealed Hannah. When you began to expand your business, I asked her to help. You. But she didn't know the whole story, just that you were someone special who needed guidance. The puzzle continued to come together. The coincidences that were not coincidences, the encounters that seemed like the work of chance, everything was part of a larger plan. Actually, continued Hannah, there's one more thing you need to know. She opened her purse and removed a yellowed envelope. Your father left this for you, but asked that it only be delivered at the right moment. With trembling hands, Ryan opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in his father's familiar handwriting. My dear son, if you are reading this letter, it means that you have found Hannah and that you have accomplished something extraordinary with your life. I always knew you had that potential within you. Sometimes we need someone who believes in us more than we believe in ourselves. Hannah was more than a colleague to me. She was a friend who helped me in the most difficult moments of the publishing house. When I learned that my time was coming to an end, she promised to look after you from a distance, to be a silent guardian angel. But there is something else you need to know. The social project that Hannah coordinates on Martha's Vineyard. It is funded by the foundation I created in my last years, a foundation that now belongs to you. I know you have built your own path, your own success, but perhaps it is time to join forces to transform even more lives, as Hannah has been doing all these years. With love, your father. Ryan let the letter fall into his lap, stunned by the revelation. The foundation, all this social work. Your father always believed in the power of education and culture to transform lives, said Hannah softly. Just as you transformed the transportation sector into something more human, more accessible. Is that why you came to Martha's Vineyard? In part, she replied, but also because I needed to start over, to find my own path. Your father taught me that sometimes we need to get lost to find ourselves. The sun was already high in the sky, and the beach was beginning to gain movement. In the distance, a group of children from the social project gathered for an art class on the sand. Come, said Hannah, standing up and extending her hand to him. I want to show you something. She led him to a small building near the bookstore. It was a welcoming space, with walls covered in children's drawings and shelves filled with colorful books. This is the Charles Edward Space, she presented. Here, we offer reading, art, and music workshops for underprivileged children. Each smile, each discovery, each small transformation is part of your father's legacy. Ryan felt his heart expand. All the success he had achieved in recent years seemed to gain new meaning. It wasn't just about building a prosperous company, it was about continuing the work his father had begun, about transforming lives. Hannah, he said, his voice laden. With emotion, I think I finally understand why destiny brought us together again. She looked at him with curiosity, and at that moment, Ryan realized that his journey was just beginning. The universe had woven a much more complex fabric than he could imagine, uniting past and present in a story of love, overcoming, and purpose. What he still didn't know was that the greatest challenge and the greatest revelation was yet to come. Because some stories need time to reveal their deepest secrets, and destiny still held a surprise that would forever change the lives of both. Evening was falling on Martha's Vineyard when Hannah invited Ryan to see her home, a charming two-story building with a view of the sea. The place breathed the same serenity as its owner, walls in soft tones, shelves filled with books, and the unmistakable aroma of jasmine coming from the garden. I need to show you something, said Hannah, leading him to her office on the upper floor. The room was cozy, with a large window that framed the sunset like a living painting. On one of the walls, there was a mural of photographs that immediately captured Ryan's attention. "This is from the inauguration of the publishing house," explained Hannah, pointing to an old photo where she appeared next to Ryan's father, Charles. Edward was so excited that day. He had a unique vision about the power of books to transform lives. Ryan observed the photos attentively, recognizing moments from the history of the publishing house that his father loved so much, until his eyes landed on an image that made his heart stop for a moment. It was a photo of a publishing house gathering, and in it was his mother Laura smiling beside Hannah. "You also knew my mother?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Hannah hesitated for a moment, as if carefully choosing her words. "Laura was an extraordinary woman," she finally said. "She and I were closer than you imagine." Something in Hannah's tone of voice made Ryan turn to face her. There was a deep emotion in her eyes, an untold story hanging in the air between them. "What? Aren't you telling me, Hannah?" She walked to her desk and opened a drawer, removing an old diary. "Your mother gave me this before leaving for that business trip," she explained, her voice soft. "She asked me to keep it and, if something happened to her, give it to you at the right moment." Ryan took the diary with trembling hands. His mother had departed when he was only 12, on a business trip that ended in tragedy. The car accident that took her had left a wound that never completely healed. "Why now?" he asked, unable to open the diary. "Because you are finally ready to understand the whole truth," replied Hannah. Laura knew that trip would be dangerous. She was investigating irregularities in the company where she worked, discovered things that, well, she needed to protect you. Ryan sat in a nearby armchair, trying to absorb what he was hearing. "What kind of irregularities?" "Misappropriation of funds from social projects," explained Hannah. "Your mother was an auditor, discovered that powerful people were stealing money meant for daycares and schools. She gathered all the evidence, but knew she was being followed." "Is that why she traveled to deliver the evidence?" Hannah nodded. "She succeeded. The evidence reached the authorities, the guilty were punished. But the price," her voice faltered. "Laura knew the risks. That's why she sought me out beforehand, made me promise to take care of you if something happened." "So it wasn't an accident?" Ryan felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. "It was," Hannah quickly clarified. "But she was so worried, so tense. Maybe if she had been calmer—" She stopped, taking a deep breath. "The important thing is that she achieved what she wanted, protecting you and bringing justice." Ryan opened the diary, finding his mother's delicate handwriting. On the first page there was a letter addressed to him. "My dear son, if you are reading this, it means that Hannah has fulfilled her promise. She is more than a friend. She's the sister I never had, the person I trust, most in this world after your father. There is so much I want to tell you, so much you need to know, about courage, about doing the right thing even when it's difficult, about how love can manifest in unexpected ways. Hannah promised to help me protect you, and I know she did this in the most extraordinary way possible. She has a special gift for healing broken hearts, for showing people their true potential. But there is something else you need to know, something I've kept in the back of this diary. A truth that may change everything, but that will only make sense when you are ready to understand it. With all my love, Mom." Ryan looked at Hannah, who was watching the sea through the window. The sun had already set, leaving the sky in shades of purple and deep blue. "What truth is this?" he asked. Hannah turned to face him, silent tears streaming down her face. "Keep reading," she said softly. "Some truths need to be discovered in their own time." The wind blew through the open window, bringing with it the scent of jasmine from the garden. In the distance, the island's lighthouse began to shine, its beam of light cutting through the growing darkness, like a guardian of ancient secrets about to be revealed. The night had completely fallen over Martha's Vineyard when Ryan began to read his mother's diary. Hannah prepared tea for both of them and discreetly withdrew to the garden, giving him privacy to discover the truths that Laura had kept for so long. The first pages were filled with everyday memories, special moments with Ryan as a child, reflections on life. But as he advanced in his reading, a deeper story began to emerge. His mother wrote about her special friendship with Hannah, about how the two had met in college and become inseparable. "Hannah has always been my strength," Laura wrote. In one passage, "When I discovered the irregularities in the company, it was she who gave me courage to move forward. She understood more than anyone the weight of doing the right thing." Ryan continued reading, absorbing each word like drops of rain on dry land. His mother described how Hannah helped her gather evidence, how the two worked together to expose the corruption that diverted resources from social projects. But there was more, much more. On a page marked with a blue ribbon, he found a revelation that made his heart stop. "My dear son, there is a story I need to tell you, a story that begins long before you were born. Hannah and I grew up together, in the same orphanage in Newport. We were more than friends. We were sisters at heart, two dreamy girls who promised to always take care of each other. When I was adopted at the age of 12, I made Hannah promise that we would never lose touch. Years later, when we reconnected in college, it was as if destiny was bringing us together again. She was there when I met your father, when I got married, when you were born. But there is something else, something I've kept in the depths of my heart all these years. Hannah is not just my best friend, my sister at heart. She is your godmother, Ryan, not just on paper but by a much deeper bond. When you were born, Hannah made a vow: if something happened to me or your father, she would be your guardian, your protecting angel. But she wanted to do this in her own way, not as a constant presence that could make you dependent, but as an invisible force that would guide you in the most important moments. That's why, when I realized I was being followed, that the danger was real, I sought out Hannah. I knew she would fulfill her promise, that she would find a way to help you grow, to transform you into the man that I always knew you could be. What happened that night at the diner was no coincidence, my son. It was the love of a godmother who waited for the right moment to make a difference in your life, to give you the push you needed, exactly as she did so many times for me." Ryan looked up from the diary, his hands trembling. Through the window he could see Hannah in the garden, tending to her jasmine flowers under the moonlight. How many nights must she have spent thinking about him, planning the best way to honor the promise made to his mother? He continued reading, discovering more details about his mother's and Hannah's lives, how they had created the foundation to support underprivileged children together, inspired by their own story at the orphanage, how Hannah had used her own resources to help other taxi drivers in difficulty, always seeking ways to multiply the good she had received in her own life. On one of the last pages of the diary, he found a photograph he had never seen before. In it, his mother and Hannah, still teenagers, smiled embraced in front of the orphanage. On the back, a message written by Laura: "For my soul sister, who taught me that family is much more than blood, I promise that my son will also be yours." Ryan closed the diary and walked to the garden. Hannah was sitting on a wooden bench, her face illuminated by the soft moonlight. Upon seeing him approach, she smiled that smile he knew so well, the same smile that had given him hope on a cold night 5 years ago. "Why did you never tell me?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. "Because some truths need to be discovered, not revealed," she answered softly. "Your mother knew this. She wanted you to find me on your own, for our connection to be built naturally, not out of obligation or duty." Ryan sat beside her, smelling the jasmine flowers that his mother loved so much. Now he understood why Hannah always cultivated these flowers. They were Laura's favorites, a silent tribute to the friend who had departed. "You never stopped looking after me, did you?" Hannah took his hand, her eyes shining with contained tears. "I promised your mother I would be your guardian angel. But you, Ryan, you went far beyond anything we dreamed for you. You transformed not only your own life, but the lives of so many others." The wind blew softly, bringing with it the distant sound of waves. In the sky, the stars shone like silent witnesses to an encounter that had been written long before that night at the diner. But there was still one more revelation, to come, a final secret that Hannah kept in her heart. A secret that would forever change the way Ryan saw his own story and his place in the world. The next morning dawned with a different clarity on Martha's Vineyard. Ryan woke up early and went for a walk on the beach, trying to process everything. He had discovered the night before his mother's diary had revealed so much, but something in Hannah's gaze suggested that there was still more to be said. After breakfast at the inn, he found Hannah at the bookstore. She was organizing some books when he entered, the bell on the door announcing his arrival. "I thought you'd come early," she said, smiling. "Shall we take a walk?" They walked to a small pier at the end of the beach, a quiet place where fishing boats rested gently in the calm morning waters. Hannah carried an old folder in her hands, something Ryan couldn't help but notice. "After your mother departed," Hannah began, sitting on one of the pier's benches, "I started gathering things for you. Memories, photographs, small fragments of history that would one day make sense." She opened the folder and began to remove photographs, letters, and old documents. There were photos of her with Laura at the orphanage, moments from the two's adolescence, celebrations in college. But one photo in particular caught Ryan's attention. It showed Hannah very young, holding a baby. "This is you," she said softly. "On the day of your birth, Laura insisted that I be the first person, after her and your father, to hold you." Ryan observed the photo attentively. There was something familiar in the way Hannah smiled at the baby in her arms, something that went beyond a godmother's affection. "Hannah," he began, feeling that he was on the verge of an important discovery, "why did you really wait so long to reveal yourself?" She took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Because the complete truth is more complex than you imagine, Ryan. It wasn't just about being your godmother or about honoring the promise I made to Laura." Hannah removed a sealed envelope, yellowed by time, from the folder. "Your mother left this too. She asked that it only be given to you when you were ready to understand the whole story." With trembling hands, Ryan opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and an official document from the orphanage where his mother and Hannah had grown up. "My beloved son, if you are reading this letter, it means you already know part of the story, about my friendship with Hannah, about our life at the orphanage, about the promise she made to look after you. But there is something else, something I kept in the depths of my heart all these years. Hannah is not just your godmother, Ryan. She is part of your story in a much deeper way. When I discovered I was pregnant, I was facing a delicate health moment. The doctors were not optimistic about my chances of carrying the pregnancy to term. It was Hannah who stood by my side throughout the process, who gave me strength to continue, who promised that, if something happened to me during childbirth, she would take care of you as if you were her own son. But the universe had even more special plans for us. The document that accompanies this letter will reveal something that perhaps you have already intuited. Hannah is your biological mother. When the doctors said I could not have children, it was she who offered to be our donor. Your father and I accepted with tears of gratitude. Hannah didn't just give us the chance to be parents. She gave us you, the greatest gift we could receive. That's why your smile always reminded me so much of hers. That's why she always had that special instinct to know exactly what you needed. Even from a distance, the blood that runs in your veins is the same that runs in hers. But Hannah, with her infinite generosity, never wanted to take my place. She knew that you needed to build your own story, find your own path. That's why she chose to be your silent guardian, your protecting angel in the shadows. When you found her that night at the diner, it was no coincidence. It was a mother's love, recognizing the right moment to make a difference in her son's life, even if he didn't know the complete truth. Now you know, my love, you have two mothers who love you infinitely, one who raised you with all her heart, and another who gave you life and never stopped watching over you, even from a distance, with all my love, Mom Laura. Ryan raised his eyes from the letter, meeting Hannah's gaze full of contained tears. Years of unanswered questions, of inexplicable connections, of deep feelings he couldn't understand. Everything finally made sense. The sun was high in the sky now, reflecting on the calm waters of the sea like thousands of diamonds. A gentle breeze brought the scent of jasmine from the nearby garden, the same perfume that always made him feel inexplicably at home. But the story had not yet ended, because some truths are so deep, so transforming, that they need time to be completely understood. And destiny still had one last surprise in store for that morning on Martha's Vineyard. Dear friends who have accompanied us on this emotional journey, if the story of Ryan and Hannah touched your heart, if you were moved by predestined encounters and the twists of fate, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Each day we bring unique and special stories that make us believe in the power of love and transformation. For you who are watching us now, which city are you watching from? Share with us in the comments. Also tell us about a special moment in your life where an act of kindness changed everything. After all, each of us has the power to be a guardian angel in someone's life, just as Hannah was for Ryan. If this story touched your heart, we have a special playlist with other equally moving narratives waiting for you. Click on the link to the left to discover more stories of love, redemption, and encounters that transform lives. And don't forget, sometimes all someone needs is a small push to continue. Be that special person in someone's life today. Turn on the bell and don't miss any of our stories. More tomorrow. A warm hug